It's not, it's not actually a good measurement to measure the situation, the level of the Ummah. Because the Ummah sometimes, you may have a lot of people coming to Fajr and Jum'ah, but still we are not, I mean, look at the response to what happened in Gaza. The response is really bad. I mean, nobody can bring some water to them, to Gaza. Gaza in a siege, and nobody can break that siege because Israel tell no, you cannot come. So I cannot say that measurement is correct because even if it was hadith, but I don't think it was hadith. That's my thoughts for today.
May I say something, Abu Omar?
Go ahead, Habib. Go ahead.
This what Brother Muhammad is talking about is very, very essential. And as far as I understand, and I'm convinced, the ideology that says that everything Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, anything that came out of his mouth, is revelation, wahi. And this was an idea that started with Al-Imam al-Shafi'i. He called him Sahibul Wahyayn, the one with the two wahis. Meaning one wahi is Al-Quran, the other wahi is anything that came out of his mouth. No one before Imam al-Shafi'i said that. It became common among Muslims. طيب, Sayyidina Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, number one was a human being. Number two was Nabi, prophet. Number three was Rasulullah, receiving a message. Now, if we accept the ruling of Imam al-Shafi'i, anything and everything Sayyidina Muhammad said was absolute wahi from Allah. The example you just mentioned in Ma'arakat Badr, it had to do with camping before the water wells or after the water wells, basically. And Rasul said, let's park here, let's camp before the water wells. And the Sahabi says, it's not a good idea. Is it wahi from Allah? He said, no. He said, okay, the better position to be in is after the water well, so we can drink and they cannot. And that was a good example from Sirah that proves my point here, that it's not everything that Rasul said was wahi from Allah, la Quran. The Quran is his message. بَلِّغْ مَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْكَ مِنْ رَبِّكَ. Deliver the message that you have received from Allah. The message is Al-Quran Al-Kareem. طيب, Sayyidina Muhammad was also a prophet. So he had some information from Al-Ghaib that others do not have. That's the meaning of a prophet. Someone who is told things that others were not told of. But he was also a human being. I'll give you an example. You know, a man can tell his wife, I love you. Is that wahi? I mean, I bet Sayyidina Muhammad told his wife, multiple wives, he probably told them, I love you. You are beautiful, for example. Is that wahi from Allah? No, of course not. He's a human being talking to his wife. So I think the Ummah is very confused about this thing. The people who adopted the idea of anything and everything is wahi, and that was one of the building blocks of ilm al-hadith. Ilm al-hadith. Al-hadith is anything that Muhammad said. Now there is a lot of people, including myself here, that we look at that with certain considerations. Is this hadith according to the Quran? Is this hadith personal? It is only applies to that one situation. Is it absolute that has to be a ruling for Muslims throughout time? This is the big question. I think I said what I believe, but this is a major question to be discussed. Yes. Shukran.
We have a question from Al-Akh Karim. His question is, can we translate hadith? Wa alaikum salam. Can we translate hadith to communication? Yes, we can. It can be communication. It can be a saying of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as long as we are expressing something that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam communicated to us or talked to us about. Dr. Suhail, Faddal, you have the stage.
Jazakallah khair. I'm really enjoying listening to the discussion. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala Rasulullah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. I mean, this is part of big dilemma that we Muslims have been struggling with for centuries now. There are a few ideas that are they start taken for granted, and they are the foundations of the Salafi methodology or Salafi thinking or school of thought or whatever. And it's very unfortunate that this Salafi school of thought has been and still dominant, completely dominant in the minds of all Muslims. Yes, there are different Islamic groups. This is Salafi, Ikhwan, this and that, Tabligh, etc. But all of them, they are based on the Salafi intellectual foundation. And the Salafi intellectual foundation is very dangerous. It's the reason why we are in this terrible situation. And it is based on few ideas. One of them is this. One of them is the one that we have been discussing, is that every hadith, especially if it is in the Sahih or in Bukhari, is authentic. Not only it is authentic, which is really should be question mark there, because that's a human effort that was done after 2 centuries after the death of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and 600,000 hadith that Bukhari explored and came up with 4,000, and people want to convince us that his work was 100%. There was no mistake whatsoever. Every hadith is correct, authentic. Not only that, but every hadith is applicable in every context. You can take any hadith and apply. There are some Islamic groups that are based on one hadith, the authenticity of which is questionable. So they, so that's it, we form a group and we go and start fighting people to force them to be Muslim. Based on what? Based on hadith. Or verses. The Salafi also, the methodology, does not link they dropped completely the purposes of Islam, maqasid, that this deen is essentially a mission with purposes. It's not rigid, structured thing. It's this deen came that people embrace it as a mission to achieve very noble goals. Maqasid, risala bi maqasid. This was dropped completely. So it became very rigid fiqh. So every hadith in Sahih is authentic. Every hadith is applicable in every context. Every verse also is applicable in every context. You can take verse of qital and then apply it. Regardless of, does this fulfill the purpose of Islam? Does this apply in this context or does not apply? There are verses that are contextuals. They are not principles in Islam. It is not a principle in Islam to fight. You can be excellent Muslim and you never fight and you never do anything. And you never engage in any fighting. So no distinction between foundational verses and contextual. No distinction between foundational hadith and contextual, authentic hadith and questionable. If a hadith is not consistent with the principle of Islam, it should be questioned, because it's not only the sanad, it's not only the chain of narration that matters, but also the content, the matan. And then we have, on top of all of this Salafi methodology freezes completely the mind, the intellect. Why? Because they are claiming that whatever was done by the Salaf is perfect. And we should rely on that completely because they are better than us. They are closer to the Prophet time. So we should not even think. So dropping the mission of Islam, dropping the maqasid, dropping the context, and freezing the mind. That's the paradigm that is dominant today among all Muslims.
And this is the result, what we have today.
And the result is what you see.
Yeah.
Very few
Can you,
exceptions.
Dr. Suhail, can you just repeat that slowly, because it's like very important and very condensed sentence.
Which the last one?
Yes, the thing.
Dropping the mission and the maqasid, which is the essence of Islam. When we had enlightened scholars, what did they say? أينما المصلحة فتم شرع الله.
Yes.
That's when we had people who think. They said whatever serves the greater good, that's the deen. Dropping the mission and maqasid, dropping the context, no distinction between what is foundational, what is contextual, and freezing the mind. Why freezing the mind? Because what the Salaf have done is enough. So in order to be alim, go and memorize Ibn Taymiyyah and memorize Ibn al-Qayyim and memorize that, and you become alim. But don't think. No ijtihad. Dropping ijtihad, which is what keeps Islam relevant. So what is left? What is left is the appearances, madahir. These are the criterion we use today to say this is a good Muslim, the way they look, sha'air. And then also we have in our mind, the more strict the person is, the more pious. That's also Salafi foundation. That al-ahwat, sadd daraya. So if you're not sure, haram is safer. So in the mind of most Muslims nowadays, the one who is more strict is more pious. Nobody will tell you, if you talk about a person, nobody will tell you that this person is a good Muslim because his manners or her manners are good. No, they will tell you because his beard is long, because he is always in the masjid, because he's isolated, he does not interact with anybody. He's a pure Muslim, very pure, does not get engaged. So totally isolated. That's the profile of a good Muslim. All of this is the result of that methodology. Believe me, today, the one who calls themselves Salafi, that's of course, the ones who call them Ikhwan, that's Salafi. It's just very small modifications, tactical modifications. The Tabligh group, Salafi, the Tahrir group, Salafi, all of them, including the Muslim who does not belong to any group, including the Muslim who is not practicing. If you tell them to define Islam, they will define it the Salafi way, including those who say we are against those Salafi people and we are opposing them. But if you tell them, ask them to define Islam, they will define it the Salafi way. So the paradigm, the original Islam was lost because of those few ideas. What do you expect if you come to Islam and drop its essence, drop its mission, drop maqasid, drop ijtihad, which is essential to keep it relevant because life is evolving.
Yes.
And drop ijtihad, bind yourself or restrict yourself by some hadith that are questionable authenticity, and then apply them regardless of the context. What do you expect? You expect what you see, complete stagnation and backwardness. I mean, if you freeze your mind, if you have political stagnation and intellectual stagnation, both. Political stagnation that started from the transition from Khilafah al-Rashida to the dynasty rule. From the time Muawiyah imposed himself and then especially imposed Walid, imposed Yazid, imposed his son, and then it becomes the dynasty rule. That's political stagnation, no more freedom, no more creativity, nothing. And you know that absolute power what does it do to the nations? And then we had the intellectual stagnation. When people came at the point, they turned the ijtihad of Imam Shafi'i, Imam Malik, Imam Abu Hanifa, they turned them into madhab, and they said, that's it, it's enough. We don't need any more. We have the ijtihad of our faqih, and always the problem happens with the followers. Because if you read the story of those fuqaha, great fuqaha, none of them claimed that whatever he came up with, that's Islam. None. And they respected each other differences, because differences existed almost in everything and from day one. You read about the Sahaba, you will find differences among them about Hajj, about Salah, about fasting, about everything. Because that's the beauty and the greatness of our deen. A religion that is meant to be valid for all times and all places has to be flexible.
Yes.
So it came, that adds to Islam. So when we say valid for all times and all places, we have to make it valid. We have the ingredients, but it's our job. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before Muhammad used to send or sent a new messenger with a fresh message to his people that's suitable only for those people. That's why he did not preserve it. Suitable only for that time and for those people. Of course, there are things that do not change, but that message is suitable for those people and that time. And then with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from his wisdom revealed a comprehensive but very flexible guidance and assigned us the duty to keep it relevant. There is no more prophet is going to be sent to America. It's the Muslim Americans who have to come up with an Islamic construct that is suitable to them. They
Yes.
have the ingredients, they have the thawabit, the constant, and they have the maqasid.
Yes.
And then you have to make the effort to come up with an understanding that is suitable in 21st centuries to United States. You cannot take it even to Canada. People in Canada have to come up with their own. Not only now we are taking the products, a human effort that was done centuries ago and thousands of miles away, and we're bringing them here, and we're raising generations on the books of Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Qayyim and this and that. Whole generation translate. The only thing that we did is translate to English. That's the only effort that we did. Take those books, translate them to English, instead of doing our job of coming up with an Islamic construct or Islamic understanding that is suitable and that does the job. Because Islam, wherever it settles, and Muslims, they make a difference. They serve the cause of justice. They make that society more peaceful, more prosperous, more secure, etc. They achieve the goals of Islam. So it's the amount of change that is needed is nothing less of rediscovering the original Islam, because it was lost over the centuries because of that political stagnation and intellectual stagnation, and that the result is what you see. Just compare. Few dozens of people changed the world in one generation, and 1.5 billion Muslims are watching people being slaughtered in Gaza, and they cannot do anything. Just compare the two. Totally irrelevant, as if they don't exist, very marginal. We have a great, inspiring, and empowering religion. We just have to discover it or rediscover it, because it was lost. Speaking specifically about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, most of what the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam has done was as a human being. And the Sahaba understood that very well. That's why they keep asking that question. They keep asking that question, is this as a prophet or as a leader? And if everything that Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam did it as prophet, then what's the point that he's a role model? Because we're not prophets. How can we take him as a role model? That drops the whole idea of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam being uswa hasana. That's one. That's how dangerous it is. If everything he did and said, he did it as a prophet, then how can we take him as a role model? No, we're not prophets. That's number one. And number two, that defeat the whole purpose that the prophetic community and the prophetic movement was the most successful movement in history, because there is a model that is effective there. There is a model of building and leading a community. If you come and say that it all happened because he was a prophet, then we cannot even blame ourselves that if we are failing now. But if you accept that that was done by human efforts,
Yes.
and the evidence are very clear,
Yes.
because a number of times Quran, first of all, anytime Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam consults with people, that's a human decision, because he will not consult about something that was revealed.
Exactly.
Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam will not consult with people about something that Allah has told him. So every consultation, that's a human being. That's number one. Number two, there were decisions that Quran was revealed to correct them, to say these were not the best decisions.
Yes.
Number two. Number three, there was a defeat in Uhud. Why they were be seized in Al-Ahzab? If it was everything was done as a prophet and miracles, it should be much easier than this. Why Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam would plan his migration? He should not plan. He should just come out and say, okay, Allah will take care of me.
Mm-hmm.
But all of this was done through a human effort, because there was great leadership of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. There was great strategy and vision there, and discipline. There are elements of success there that we have to study. And that success, great success stories, left us no option, because it happened in the worst conditions that you can think of. So Muslims will never have any excuse. But we came up with that excuse that everything that was done because he was a prophet, so that we don't blame ourselves if we fail. No, it happened through human efforts. And as I said, the evidences are, by the way, Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam twice, once or twice, depending on which one is authentic. Twice or once, people come to him and tricked him. They said, our tribe is coming to Islam, and we want some people to go and teach them. And the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam sent the best companions. And it was a conspiracy, and they murdered them.
Yes.
So why, if everything he was done was as a prophet, he would not do it. Why he would send his companion? But he was doing things as a human being.
Indeed.
And several times Quran was revealed, and in a very harsh language, to the addressing the prophetic community. Yes.
I don't want to expand too much without properly writing down what you wrote. And Assalamu alaikum, of course. Everybody's joining. I've joined the group for a while. I'll try to stick to one language. My specific question was that I think in communication, you can look at the table of contents of books of communication. There's so much more facial expressions, nonverbal, and it expands on that. So that's why I think the proper translation of Ilm al-Hadith could be the science, the sweet science, or the science of communication. As I said, there are a lot of points that I would like to interject and speak about, but it's not my place yet to talk about it unless I'm well prepared. But on the occasion that you mentioned, which was a very sad occasion, I think it happened between Uhud and Al-Ahzab. The reaction was one Sariya was sent, and Khalid bin Walid was the one who was sent. Now I think the one I'm talking about is that one, and I refer to Al-Rahiq al-Makhtoum by Al-Mubarak Furi, and I would like to include it maybe in the chat if I'm allowed. He was appointed, and there are details of what happened, and then his reaction to them in cold-bloodedness, murdering these people that they were sent as emissaries to teach Islam and nothing else, was also something that maybe the Prophet, but I don't know the authenticity. See, we're going back to authenticity in the discussion. I don't know if his reaction the Prophet favored, but it's something that happened. I think the quote was Allahumma inni abru ilayka min Khalid. Allahu a'lam.
Now, two
But yeah,
incidents. You're mixing two incidents.
okay.
One incident
yeah,
Let's
is
have
I
a
wanted to
question.
say
Let's have a
before-
question, Kareem, if you
Yeah.
have. We want we already half an hour into our timing. So
Yeah,
give us a question.
I
Suhail
had my
can answer.
question in. I said I think that Ilm al-Hadith can be properly translated as communication, which includes a bunch of
Yes.
ways of communicating, including verbal. I'm not in position to discuss all these points right now. And I think Ilm al-Maqasid that the doctor wants us to look into should be more about Ilm al-Maqasid al-Qur'aniyya, not Maqasid al-Sharia, as Dr. Jasser Auda is recently maybe talking about more. And then lastly, on that point, there's a verse, الَّذِينَ يَجْعَلُونَ الْقُرْآنَ عِضِينَ, so like breaking up the Quran and not having it contextualized. I think it speaks to what you're saying, Dr. Did enjoy hearing you speak about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kareem.
Shukran. Thank you very much.
May I say something?
Sure.
I want to keep on the same thing you were discussing, Dr. Suhail. You mentioned the word Islamic principles. I mean, I stopped there because I want to come back and stress that. We grew up learning that, what is the Islamic principles, that hadith, that Rasulullah was sitting in the masjid and somebody with very white clothes, very dark hair comes and sits next to him, Ya Muhammad, mal Islam, the hadith. Shahadatu an la ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, iqamus mal iman, mal ihsan. We grew up believing that Islamic principles to be a Muslim is to say la ilaha illallah, make salat, make zakat, Sawm Ramadan, Hajjul Bayt. I have a problem with that, and I hope you can help me understand. When we say Islamic principles, whatever happened to freedom of religion? Is that an Islamic principle?
Absolutely.
It's not mentioned in the hadith. What happened to justice? Establishing justice on earth, in the land. Is that an Islamic principle? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَالسَّمَاءَ رَفَعَهَا وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانَ أَلَّا تَطْغَوْا فِي الْمِيزَانِ. Absolute justice and equilibrium. What is that an Islamic principles? And I will add something else which you mentioned, which is very, very important. I believe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran accepted or condoned al-a'raf, al-urf. Al-urf, as I understand, I accept
الأمر بالمعروف من العرف.
Not only that, but al-urf, which is what's agreed upon among certain people at certain time, al-a'raf, what people have accepted to be the norm, to be good or to be bad. This is my understanding of al-urf. This urf may be different in Saudi Arabia than it is in Pakistan, for example. Do you agree? So I'll come back to what you said, very important. When we want to tell people about the principles of Islam, first of all, what we should learn ourselves about the principles of Islam is an effort that needs to be done. Right now, I think most of us may disagree what is the principle of Islam. And I think we need to work on that. The principles are not salat, sawm, wa hajj. The principles are much higher. And I will say something else. I believe that we can divide these two principles into two categories. The first category is principles that apply to everyone on earth, universal. And the other category, which may be applicable in certain places and applicable a little different in other places. Do you agree with my assessment?
Totally agree. The first thing that we need, to rediscover the true Islam or the original Islam is first of all to make the effort to elaborate on our mission and the maqasid, because that's a starting point. And then based on that, we go to the texts and see which one is foundational and which one is contextual. Because it was so clear in the minds of the original scholars and the companions. Now, we have seen and discussed this before, that Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu made ijtihad in clear-cut text. There is a text in Quran that tells clearly how to distribute the ghanaim or
وَأَلَّفَ
sadaqah.
قُلُوبُهُم. Yes.
And he changed that. Why? Because time has changed. He froze the punishment for stealing during the famine. He did not distribute the spoils of war among the soldiers when they become too much. So he switched them to salaries. These are ijtihadat after a few years after the death of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we are still in the same context, except there are some circumstances that have changed. You want to tell me that after hundreds of years and thousands of miles away and in a very different culture, I should not use my brain, I should just rely on the work that was, cannot. So the scholars understood this. Imam Malik, he was given the offer by the Khalifa to impose his fiqh and unify all Muslims, and he refused.
He refused. He went
And
to
he
jail.
refused. Why? Because he understood that this deen has a flexibility, that the Khilafah was huge at that time and encompassed different circumstances and different cultures. And then he knew that time will evolve. So he said, this is my work. This is my ijtihad. That's not deen. The Khalifa wanted to turn Al-Muwatta, the book by Imam Malik, into the fiqh reference, unified fiqh, and he refused. That's one thing. Second, there are two incidents, one by Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam and one by Ibn Abbas, that will tell you the importance of al-maqasid and al-ma'alat, the consequences. You don't take a verse and just, Quran is not a theory. Islam is not a theory. Islam interacts with reality. So it has to take the reality into consideration.
Yes.
In order to achieve its goals. It's not just apply it regardless of the consequences. One incident was Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam talking to Aisha radiallahu anha. He told her, لولا أن أهلك حديثي وعهد بالإسلام. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in the history, Kaaba was destroyed by a flood. And the people at that time did not have enough money. So when they rebuilt it smaller than the original. They did not have enough money to rebuild the Kaaba at the original dimension. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to tell you, his teacher, to tell you the importance of consequences. He told Aisha, if I'm not afraid of the fragility of the faith of your people or the community, I would destroy Kaaba and rebuild it in the original dimensions, because we can afford it now. We can afford to do it. But Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam was afraid that if Muslims see the Kaaba brought down, their iman, so the harm outweighs the good. So he did not do it. That's one. To tell you, I mentioned Imam Malik refusing to take his fiqh to become the reference for all Muslims. He refused, even though Khalifa offered that. And I told you about this incident of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Abdullah ibn Abbas. Abdullah ibn Abbas was sitting among people, and then this is one of the greatest scholars among Sahaba. Somebody came to him and asked him, هل للقاتل توبة? If someone commits a murder, can he repent? And Ibn Abbas said, yes, he can. And then in the same setting, they're still there, somebody else came with the same question. So Ibn Abbas, هل للقاتل توبة? Ibn Abbas said no. So the people around him said, what happened? Why fiqh changed it in 1 hour? He said the first one was he committed a murder and he was regretting it. And I saw in his eyes like sincere intention to make tawbah. So I told him yes. The second one wants to commit a murder and he wants a license from me to go and kill. That's why I said no. You can see how some issue like this, life and death.
Contextual.
And he said, Contextual. And he say, yes, someone who committed the murder can make tawbah, repentance. And then after 1 hour or so, he said, no, he cannot. Why? Because he didn't want that person to take a license to kill and go and kill. That's the greatness of this religion. And when people use their intellect and tried to fulfill the mission of Islam and the maqasid, and took the context, paid attention to the context, and used their intellect. And I always say it is the triangle between the text, the brain, and the context. They feed into each other. You use your intellect to extract more guidance from Quran. You use your intellect to better understand the context. The context throws challenges and problems on you and questions. You think about them, and also you seek help from the Quran. Quran was never, the text was never meant to be a replacement or substitute for the intellect, and was never meant to ignore the context. That's the biggest problem, the biggest mistake that we made, that we were told that the text is a replacement, substitute for intellect. And the text is to be applied regardless of the context. So we killed that synergetic relationship between those three things, triangle: your intellect, the text, and the context. The text was meant to enlighten the brain, not to freeze it or to cancel it, to enlighten and to guide it. That's why Quran is named guidance, hudan, to guide you, not to replace your intellect. And as you know, most scientific discoveries, they can be used for something good or can be harmful. So that's the power of the Nas text. The divine guidance is to keep you in track so that you use your brain, your intellect for things that are useful, not in a way that is harmful. And to stay away from ghaib because you are not equipped to deal with it. So Quran is taking care of that so that you can focus on discovering the rules that Allah has embedded in this universe and leverage them. Now, talking about urf, by the way, very credible schools of thoughts in Islam, and we're talking about even the early ones, like Imam Malik, etc. They consider two things that are sources of tashri'ah. One is called al-urf, the social norm, and the other is called al-masalah al-mursala.
Yes.
Masalah al-mursala is, you can translate it today to the common good or the greater good. So anything that is accepted as a social norm in that society and does not contradict something in Islam is acceptable. خذ العفو وأمر بالعرف. And as Dr. Safi said, المعروف also coming from عرف. And then in masalih al-mursala, anything that achieves the common good, as I mentioned, some scholars said, أينما المصلحة فثم شرع الله. Whatever serves the common good, that's the religion, that's the deen of Allah. Masalih al-mursala. And nowadays, there were some scholars who were brave enough, because this is used to be taboo, that you cannot do ijtihad in a text. I don't know what ijtihad you're going to do if you cannot do ijtihad in the text. You cannot, la ijtihad ma'an nas, that was taken as granted. And then, so people start talking about that. And there are a couple of things that only recently, there are scholars who were brave enough to mention them. One is general, which is if the text and the maslaha, the common good, they contradict one another, تقدم المصلحة على النص. Meaning, if you take a text, ayah or hadith, and you want to apply it, but if you apply it, it will run or cause more harm than good. As we have seen, Rasul ﷺ wanted to rebuild the Kaaba, but he did not do it because it caused more harm than good. If applying the text in a certain context does not serve the common good should take priority. I'm talking about mainstream scholars. And then the other thing is more specific, which is for the first time, there are people who were brave enough to say there is no such thing as offensive jihad in Islam. And that Rasul ﷺ never attacked people. It did not happen. And everything that happened in the history after that, has nothing to do with religion. This is a word that did not have any international law. All the empires were expanded.
Empire building. Simple
Empire
and
building.
clear. That's
Empire
it.
building. All empires were expanding.
Yes.
Yes, the Khulafa, they used jihad to mobilize people, as it is always the case. Religion is used, but that's not deen. And we have seen it, heard Dr. Qardawi, rahimahullah, Muhammad Amara, very mainstream scholars say
Yes.
Rasul ﷺ never involved in offensive jihad or never attacked people. It did not happen.
No jihad talab. Jihad
None. There is none. And if you properly understand religion nowadays, when I apply it in today's context, the only time that people are allowed and they must fight back is against occupation. Other than that, there is no room for anything. You go to another country and you fight, or you fight people because they are non-Muslim, and none of this. The only, my understanding of religion, if you apply to today's context, the only circumstances where people can and must fight back is when they are attacked by an outside force and they are occupied. Other than that, there is no room for qital in Islam in today's context. And jihad is something else, has nothing to do with fighting to begin with. Jihad meaning do your utmost, do your best, do your maximum. Try to be the best person you can. Try to be all you can be. Maximize your contribution to the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to make this world more just and more free and more secure, etc., more prosperous. That's where if you are a student, practice jihad in your study. If you are an employee, practice jihad in dealing with your family. Do your job the best possible way. So jihad is pushing your limits, doing your utmost. And that's another thing that has to be changed completely, because unfortunately, people turned qital to become a principle in Islam, and you have groups who were built on verses that are very contextual. Verses from Surah Tawbah. If you want a verse that is foundational, principle about qital, وَقَاتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَ.
That's it.
وَلَا تَعْتَدُوا.
That's it.
This is the verse that is foundation. Fight those who are fighting you and do not exceed the limit. Push them back and stop there. وَقَاتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَ وَلَا تَعْتَدُوا وَإِن جَنَحُوا لِلسَّلْمِ فَاجْنَحْ لَهَا. And then even when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked us to prepare to be strong, is to establish peace, not to fight. Because ترهبون به meaning تردعون.
Yes.
وأعدوا لهم ما استطعتم من قوة ومن رباط الخيل. And that's a principle that is accepted nowadays. All countries are building their military not to fight. All of them are building so that they can deter others from attacking them. So even preparing and being strong, it is meant so that to secure peace, because when you are strong, people do not attack you, not the other way around. And the next verse confirmed this when he said, if they opt for peace, go for it. وَإِن جَنَحُوا لِلسَّلْمِ فَاجْنَحْ لَهَا.
Can I ask you a question here to confirm what you were saying and to take it to a step further, I hope?
Mm-hmm.
First of all, it is high time, based on everything you said today, that we redefine Islam.
Mm-hmm.
Islam, the ultimate goal of a Muslim is to be a peacemaker.
Mm-hmm.
This is why we learn to say Salamu Alaikum anytime we meet somebody. And we need to mean it. It's not ritual. It's a statement we're making that summarizes our mission in life. Our mission is to spread peace. So when we meet somebody, whether he's a friend or a foe, we start with Assalamu alaikum, meaning peace be with you. That means our ultimate purpose on earth is to build peace. My ultimate purpose is not to spread Islam, is to spread peace and to be a model for others. If they choose to be Muslims because they like what I'm doing, up to them. But my purpose is to establish peace on earth for all these reasons. And for reasons that you mentioned this time and before, I finished writing my book, The Thematic Quran, and I decided to start another book. My Quran translation is called The Quran, A Contemporary Understanding. I need to write a new book called Islam, A Contemporary Understanding. That doesn't mean it's a final book explaining what Islam is. It means it is good for now. And my grandchildren should write another book called Islam, A Contemporary Understanding, because circumstances change, the situation change, the Quran meaning can have new depth and new width with a changing time. It's a living entity. It's always explaining itself in a contemporary way. And Muslims need to understand it in that sense. So, inshallah, with all your help and dua, we'll have a new book called Islam, A Contemporary Understanding that include all these principles, inshallah.
May I have a word, please? In historical, and Dr. N, sorry, I cannot talk very well, but I've been in the circle for perhaps 3-4 years or more, and your theme obviously has resonated greatly. But the one question that historically comes to mind is, have there not been other Dr. Ghannouchi and Dr. Safis in the last 30 years, 50 years, 70 years who have thought the same? And what has happened ultimately to such Dr. Suhails and Dr. Safis? Sorry, I couldn't speak any better.
Well, it does not depend on any individuals. It's inshallah, if Allah helps us to try to unlock the locked and frozen minds of Muslims, you will see a lot of creativity. People have a lot of potential and people can do wonders, but unfortunately they were brainwashed and their brains were frozen and locked by those few ideas that we mentioned. But if we manage to get this idea across that this religion is very inspiring, very empowering, it's great, but it was lost. The original version was lost. And what we had, yes, on the surface, it looks exactly same as the religion was preached by Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but in reality, if you go deeper, there is no comparison. I always use the metaphor of the jewelry, the real authentic jewelry and the one that is coated. They take a piece of iron or anything, any cheap metal, and then they coat it with silver or coated with gold, and then they look exactly the same. On appearance, they look the same, but in terms of value, there is no comparison. So a religion that went through centuries of dictatorship and intellectual and political stagnation. Yes, we had at certain point in time very strong states, but societies were collapsing underneath, and we were strong not because of ourselves. It's because of the weakness of the others. That's why we had that history. As soon as other civilization and other nations woke up, it exposed our weakness, and then suddenly the Ottoman Empire became to be called the sick man of Europe, and then we found ourselves way behind. Why? Because while the state was strong, or the empire, underneath the foundations were really collapsing. and the society was weak, because society does not prosper except with freedom, with creativity, with competition, with ijtihad to keep that religion relevant, and all of this has stopped long time ago. So I know we came to the some, as brother mentioned last time, they want to keep it to 1 hour so that they can catch the Dhuhr prayer. So let's stick to that time, inshallah.
جزاكم الله خير.
وإياكم إن شاء الله.
جزاكم الله خير. السلام عليكم.
السلام ورحمة الله.